Hi, and welcome back to Reddit Terrible Stories. I made my coworker redo a project after she submitted my work with her name on it. I've always believed that the easiest way to keep your sanity at work is to stay in your lane, do your job well, and avoid unnecessary drama. But sometimes drama doesn't just stroll into your lane, it barrels in like a semi truck with no brakes. It started on a Tuesday morning. I was sipping my coffee, checking my emails, when I saw a company wide message from our department manager praising Jessica's outstanding work on the quarterly client proposal. The proposal, the one I had spent 2 straight weeks perfecting, staying late most nights to make sure every number, every graph, every sentence was flawless. At first, I thought maybe there was some kind of mistake. Jessica and I had both been assigned projects recently, but hers was supposed to be on a completely different client. Surely this was just a mix-up, right? So I opened the attached document. My stomach dropped. It was my proposal. Every chart, every piece of research, even the formatting quirks I had spent hours obsessing over it, was all mine. The only difference was the title page. My name was gone. In its place was hers, in bold, right under the company logo. I could feel the heat rising up my neck. She had submitted my work as her own. Not only that, but she'd managed to get public praise for it from our manager, which meant she had to have told him she did it. I sat there in stunned silence for a moment, fingers hovering over my keyboard. A dozen emotions swirled in my chest: anger, betrayal, disbelief. But overriding all of them was a cold, sharp determination. I wasn't going to let this slide. But before I acted, I needed to know exactly how deep this went. I opened our internal document history, the one that tracked changes and uploads, and there it was. 2 days ago, Jessica had downloaded my final draft from the shared drive, changed the title page, and uploaded it to the submission folder. The timestamps were crystal clear. If I played this right, I could not only prove what she did, but make sure she faced the full consequences. And I already knew exactly where to start. I didn't storm into my manager's office right away. That's what Jessica would expect, an impulsive confrontation she could spin as a misunderstanding. No, if I wanted her to pay for stealing my work, I had to be methodical. First, I gathered my evidence. I took screenshots of the document history, complete with timestamps, showing when I'd uploaded my final draft and when she'd downloaded it. I saved the email she'd sent to our manager, which conveniently had the proposal attached again, with my name missing. I even exported side-by-side comparisons of my original file and the one she submitted, highlighting that every single word was identical except for the title page. Once I had that, I sat back and thought about what she valued most. Jessica wasn't just after praise. She wanted the manager's trust. She wanted to be seen as the go-to person for big projects. If I could make her lose that, the rest would crumble. The perfect opportunity came the next morning. Our manager called a follow-up meeting to brainstorm the next steps for the proposal. This meant Jessica would have to present it and answer questions in front of the whole team. That was my moment. I sent an email to the manager privately. "Hey Mark, I noticed a couple of discrepancies with the recent proposal submission and wanted to clarify them before the meeting. I have some important files to show you. Can we chat for a few minutes before the team call?" He agreed, and during that quick pre-meeting chat, I laid out everything: the original drafts with my name, the file history, the timestamps. I kept my tone calm, professional, and most importantly, disappointed rather than furious. People respond more seriously when you don't look like you're on a personal warpath. Mark's face went pale as he clicked through the evidence. "You're telling me she submitted this as her own?" he asked slowly. I nodded. "I'm not telling you anything that the file history doesn't already prove." By the time the meeting started, Mark's demeanor had changed entirely. Jessica launched into her presentation with that confident smile she always wore when she thought she was ahead of the game. But less than 2 minutes in, Mark cut her off. "Jessica," he said, "before we go further, can you explain why this document matches exactly the one OP submitted in the drafts folder last week?" Her smile faltered, and I knew the game had just begun. The silence in that conference room was thick enough to choke on. I don't think Jessica had prepared for the possibility of being confronted so openly, especially not in front of the entire team. She tried to play it off at first. "Oh, I didn't realize there was a naming mix-up," she said with a nervous laugh, flipping through her printed notes. "I must have grabbed the wrong version when I sent it in." Mark leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "The wrong version that's identical to OP's draft, except for the cover page? And with your name replacing theirs?" I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The longer the silence dragged, the redder Jessica's face got. Finally, she tried the sympathy angle. "I was under a lot of pressure, and I thought we were all working together as a team. I didn't think it mattered whose name was on it, since it was a group effort." Group effort? I almost laughed. She hadn't touched the project once until the day it was due. I'd stayed late for 2 weeks, skipped lunch breaks, and even worked from home on weekends to get it finished. Mark glanced at me. "OP, can you clarify, was this a group project?" I spoke calmly, though my heart was pounding. "No. This was assigned to me directly. The only reason Jessica had access to the draft was because it was in the shared folder." Jessica started to interrupt, but Mark raised a hand. "Enough. Jessica, after this meeting, I want you to schedule time with OP to redo the project from scratch. You'll be the one handling the revisions, and OP will review everything before it comes back to me. Understood?" Her mouth dropped open. "Redo it? But..." "No buts," he said firmly. "And next time, submit your own work." The rest of the meeting was tense. Jessica sat stiffly in her chair, eyes glued to the table, while I presented the rest of the proposal updates like nothing was wrong. It was satisfying in a quiet, cold way, watching her sit there and listen to me explain the work she had tried to steal. After the call ended, she cornered me in the hallway. "Did you have to make me look bad in front of everyone?" she hissed. I raised an eyebrow. "You did that yourself." Her glare could have burned a hole through my skull. "You'll regret this," I smiled. "Doubt it." Little did she know I wasn't done yet. Jessica avoided me for the rest of the day, but the next morning she sent me a stiffly worded email. "Per Mark's instructions, please let me know what needs to be redone for the project. I will need detailed feedback." I replied with a document so long it could have been mistaken for a thesis. Every section had comments, references, and required adjustments, because if she was going to redo this project, she was going to do it properly. No shortcuts, no creative liberties, and definitely no copy-pasting from my original draft. I scheduled a meeting with her to go over my notes. She came in 10 minutes late, holding a latte and looking like she'd rather chew glass than talk to me. "Okay," I said, opening my laptop. "Let's start with the executive summary. You'll need to reframe the problem statement entirely. This version sounds like you pulled it from a generic marketing blog." She rolled her eyes. "That's because I did pull it from a marketing blog. Why reinvent the wheel?" "Because plagiarism isn't a strategy," I said sweetly but pointedly. "Also, the client wanted specific data. You'll have to compile new stats from our Q2 reports." She sighed dramatically. "Fine." We went through section after section. Every time she tried to cut corners, I pointed it out. Every time she complained, I reminded her that Mark had ordered this, not me. By the end of the meeting, she looked exhausted. "This is going to take days," she muttered. "Yep," I said, smiling. "Better get started." The next few days were glorious. I caught her glaring at her screen, flipping through spreadsheets and muttering under her breath. She'd pop into my cubicle every so often to ask a quick question, but I'd always answer with the most detailed, time-consuming solution possible. And the best part? I was in no rush to approve anything. Every time she submitted a section for review, I found legitimate errors that sent her back to the drawing board. Not petty, not vindictive, just holding her to the same standard she had expected me to meet when I was doing the project alone. By Friday, she looked like she was running on fumes, and I wasn't finished yet. By Monday morning, Jessica's patience had evaporated. She stormed into the office 30 minutes late, slapped her bag on her desk, and muttered something about working myself to death for no reason. She didn't even greet Mark when he passed by, which was unusual. She usually turned on the charm for management. I pretended to be buried in emails, but I caught her out of the corner of my eye, scrolling aimlessly through her phone. She hadn't touched the revised draft since Friday. Around 10 a.m. Mark called both of us into his office. Jessica straightened in her seat like a kid caught texting in class, and I calmly followed. So, Mark began, steepling his fingers, how's the redo coming along? I glanced at Jessica. Last I checked, the executive summary was still incomplete. The supporting data has some inaccuracies, and the visuals need to be rebuilt from scratch. Jessica glared at me. I told you the data is fine. The client isn't going to care if the exact percentage is off by a decimal. That decimal, I replied evenly, changes the conclusion of the analysis. The client will notice and they'll ask questions. I'm not putting my name or yours on a report that can't hold up under scrutiny. Mark raised an eyebrow. Jessica, is this true? She shifted in her chair, her tone sliding into the defensive. I'm doing the work, but she's nitpicking every little thing. It's like she's looking for reasons to delay this. I didn't even have to respond. Mark leaned forward. Jessica, you submitted someone else's work with your name on it. That's not a small mistake. I expect you to meet the same standard as anyone else here. If that means doing it over until it's right, so be it. Jessica crossed her arms, muttering something about double standards under her breath. After the meeting, she barely looked at me, but the silence didn't last long. By lunch, she was venting loudly to anyone who would listen, framing herself as the victim of some grand vendetta. The problem was, our coworkers weren't buying it. They'd seen her coasting on other people's work before. They just hadn't said anything. Now, the cracks in her reputation were starting to show. And I wasn't even halfway done. By Tuesday, Jessica's hostility had evolved from passive-aggressive silence to full-blown resistance. Every time I asked about progress on the redo, she'd shoot me a clipped response like, "It's fine," or "I'll get to it." The irony was that she was burning more energy avoiding the work than she would have if she'd just done it. I knew I couldn't let her stall indefinitely. Mark had given her the task, and I wasn't going to be the one scrambling at the last minute to fix it again. So, I drafted a short, polite email to both her and Mark. Subject, status update on Q3 report, redo hi Jessica. Could you please send me your latest version of the executive summary and the data tables by end of day today? Thanks, my name. That CC to Mark wasn't accidental. Jessica read it as a shot across the bow that it was. 10 minutes later, she came to my desk, jaw tight. You really think copying Mark on that was necessary? She whispered harshly. Yes, I replied calmly, not looking up from my screen. We have a deadline, and accountability is important. You're the lead on this revision. I'm making sure we all stay aligned. She scoffed, muttered something under her breath, and stalked away. By mid-afternoon, she sent me a version of the executive summary, but it was obvious she'd done the bare minimum. The writing was sloppy, the data inconsistencies were still there, and she had even reused one of my original charts without credit. So I sent another email, this time with tracked changes that painted the document red. I didn't just point out errors, I explained why they were wrong. If she wanted to accuse me of nitpicking, I was going to make sure everyone could see that these were not subjective complaints. They were factual mistakes. By the end of the day, I overheard her telling someone in the break room that I was on a power trip and trying to humiliate her. The funny thing was, I wasn't even trying to humiliate her. But if that's how she wanted to frame it, maybe it was time to stop playing defense and start applying some pressure. Because this wasn't just about fixing one report anymore. It was about making sure she never dared to put her name on my work again. By Wednesday morning, I'd decided Jessica's pattern of laziness and deflection needed more than polite nudges. She'd clearly been counting on me to eventually swoop in and just fix it, like I had before. This time, I was going to let her crash if she didn't do the work. When Mark stopped by my desk to check in, I seized the opportunity. I've been reviewing Jessica's revisions, I said carefully, and I'm concerned about the quality. There are still data inconsistencies, and some sections look like they were copied from the original without corrections. Mark frowned. Did you give her feedback? Multiple times, I said, turning my monitor so he could see the tracked changes. I'm worried she's not taking ownership of this. He nodded slowly, scanning the glaring red edits on the screen. All right, I'll speak with her directly. About an hour later, I heard his office door close. 15 minutes after that, it slammed shut again. Jessica had stormed out, cheeks flushed, and went straight to her desk without making eye contact with me. The tension in the room was so thick you could butter toast with it. That afternoon, she sent me the final draft. I opened it, fully expecting more of the same, but it was actually good. The writing was tighter, the numbers were corrected, and the charts were accurate. She'd clearly spent some real time on it. I sent back a quick professional email. "Looks good, Jessica. Thanks for addressing the feedback." She didn't reply, but she didn't need to. I'd made my point. I wasn't someone whose work could be stolen, and I wasn't afraid to escalate when necessary. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling she might try to get back at me. People like Jessica didn't just roll over. They waited for the right moment to strike. And sure enough, by Friday, I got a little surprise that proved I was right to stay on guard. Friday morning started like any other coffee, emails, and a quiet sigh that the weekend was almost in reach. But around 10 a.m., Mark forwarded me an email that made my stomach drop. It was from Jessica, sent directly to him late the night before. The subject line read, "Concerns about project leadership." Inside, it was a neatly worded complaint about how I had been overstepping my role, micromanaging her process, and creating an uncomfortable work environment by undermining her autonomy. She even implied that I had deliberately withheld information to make her look bad. If I hadn't known better, I'd almost admire the creativity. Almost. Mark's email to me was short. "Can you come to my office at 10:30 to discuss?" When I sat down in his office, I stayed calm. "I assume this is about Jessica's email?" I asked. He nodded. "I wanted to hear your side before making any judgments." I pulled out my neatly organized folder of project emails, tracked changes, and time-stamped files. "I've documented every communication about this project," I said. She was given clear feedback multiple times, and the delays were due to her ignoring or bypassing the corrections. I also have proof she submitted my original work with her name on it before being asked to redo it. Mark took his time going through the evidence. His face didn't change much, but I could tell he was processing. Finally, he said, "I appreciate you coming prepared. This paints a very different picture than what she described." I left his office with my heart still pounding, but I knew I had done the right thing. The truth was now in black and white, and if Jessica wanted to keep playing games, she was going to lose hard. What I didn't know yet was that this incident would change how the entire team saw her, and that shift was about to work very much in my favor. By Monday morning, the office had a different atmosphere. It was subtle, quieter glances in Jessica's direction, a little less laughter at her desk, and a noticeable absence of her usual performative greetings. Something had shifted, and I suspected my meeting with Mark had more ripples than I realized. Later that day, Sarah from accounting stopped by my desk under the pretense of asking about a budget file, but really she leaned in and whispered, "So, I heard Mark called Jessica out in the team meeting Friday afternoon after you left." Apparently, after reviewing all the project evidence, Mark confronted Jessica in front of the project leads. He didn't humiliate her outright, but he did make a point about accurate representation of work and team accountability while looking directly at her. She'd apparently tried to defend herself, but when Mark mentioned documented proof, she went quiet. From that moment, people started treating her with caution. No more automatic backing her up just because she was loudest in the room. Meanwhile, I noticed something else. My inbox was quieter. No more frantic messages from Jessica at midnight asking me to just check something for her. No more last-minute requests to fill in the gaps before a presentation. And then came the twist. Late Tuesday afternoon, Mark called me in again. "I've been thinking about the next big project," he said, "and I'd like you to take the lead this time. I trust your organization and follow through." I kept my face neutral, but inside, I was practically screaming. It wasn't just a win, it was a public vote of confidence. Jessica, who had been sitting just outside his office, definitely heard him. When I walked out, her smile was thin enough to cut glass. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't playing defense anymore. The board was mine now, and she knew it. By the time the new project officially kicked off, Jessica had stopped pretending to be friendly. She didn't congratulate me, didn't offer to help, didn't even make snide comments. Instead, she started avoiding me entirely, which honestly was the best outcome I could have asked for. The real surprise came 2 weeks later when I overheard HR calling her into their office. Word traveled fast, apparently. She'd tried to pull the same stunt with someone else on a smaller task. But this time, that person went straight to HR before she could spin her story. Combined with the notes and emails from my incident, it painted a pretty damning picture. Jessica wasn't fired, but she was reassigned to a less prominent role. No big client presentations, no lead responsibilities, and a direct report who was known for being meticulous to the point of suffocation. It was essentially a professional demotion without the title change. When she cleaned out part of her desk a few days later, she didn't even glance in my direction. But I caught her muttering under her breath to someone else, "Some people can't handle competition." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because the truth was, I had handled competition. I'd just done it without lying, stealing, or stepping on anyone else to get ahead. The project I led ended up being a huge success, earning praise from the client and from upper management. And while I never went out of my way to make Jessica's life miserable, I also never gave her the chance to use me again. In the end, she had taught me a valuable lesson. Some people will always try to take credit for your work, but if you stand your ground and keep your receipts, you can turn the tables in a way they never see coming. And honestly, watching her submit her own work without my input and seeing it get torn apart in review was the sweetest, quietest revenge I could have asked for.